Good morning. I won't do like I did the ones at 8:30 and made them say it 3 times because they were still asleep. And this is about my 5th introduction, so I'm a little punchy in doing this. But thank you for joining us for this discussion on DODNet, enabling zero trust for the common use network. I'm J.C. Caesar with NetApp, and NetApp is honored to be a supporting partner of AFCEA TechNet Cyber. On this panel, DISA leaders will discuss recent zero trust assessments, how things will improve, and share best practices. As the intelligent data infrastructure company, NetApp equips the warfighter with the most secure data storage available with zero trust policies baked into our DISA APL approved operating system, along with industry-only anti-ransom protection guarantee for data storage. Our panelists for today are Ms. Carissa Landymore, who will be our moderator, Mr. Chris Pym, Mr. Mike Butler, and Mr. Alex Hornberger. And I'd be remiss if I didn't want to just say hello to Sharon Woods. Ms. Woods, glad that you're here in J6, so thank you so much. Ms. Carissa Landymore is the DODNet Program Manager. She has served DISA for 14 years, most recently in a leadership role with DIOS and Branch Chief of the Mill Drive Cloud Storage Office. Mr. Chris Pym is the Thunderdome Program Manager and the Division Chief for PEO Cyber. He has developed expertise over the last 30 years in big data, analytics, and identity management. Prior to DISA, he served in the U.S. Air Force supporting the AWACS computer system. Mike Butler is DODNet's Chief Engineer, which serves as the single network service provider for Fourth Estate consolidation and migration efforts. Mr. Butler has served in the federal government for 17 years. When I was in kindergarten, make you guys laugh, leading engineering teams at DISA State and Justice Department. And Mr. Alex Hornberger is DISA Zero Trust Chief Engineer. Prior to DISA, he led DISA's team for August Shell in big data analytics projects and held leadership positions in programs like JRSS. Thank you very much, and welcome our panelists, and the floor is yours.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I'm really excited to see the turnout we have here today. We've got a great panel planned for you. Enabling zero trust for the common use network is something that we are very proud to be working on. It's a big partnership, I would say, across DISA, but especially between Chris's team and myself to be able to deliver DODNet and being able to enable them to deliver also the Thunderdome capabilities as part of that to help all of the defense agencies meet their zero trust requirement. So I want to open up first with some metrics. DODNet received a requirement back in 2019 from the DepSecDef for the Fourth Estate network optimization effort. We have been working diligently on that ever since. But I always like to open up with some key metrics here. We have 22 DoD agencies that we are responsible for optimizing. We need to collapse in phase 1, 13 of the networks. There's over 13 defense agencies, in phase 1, 22 overall. There's 26 disparate networks, 12 different service desks, all working in different silos, supporting one another. And then over 600 different contracts, 850 sites, and over 370,000 users that we have to come together and collapse those disparate networks and work together to do that. That is so that we can enable our warfighter, right? We have to be able to partner and work together to do that. Over the last couple of years, we're continuing to modernize. We need to be able to scale. We need to be able to automate. We need to be agile. And in order to do that, we need you. So that is really our call for action as you hear the team talking today. We're going to tell you a little bit about how we're modernizing, but we can't do it without you because we need to continue to evolve if we're going to remain that center of excellence. We want to be that IT premier service provider as part of DISA, and we can't do it alone. So as you're hearing these things, we want to hear from you on how we can continue to remain that center of excellence. So please don't hesitate to ask questions. We're going to do a lot of discussion up here. It's definitely not going to be death by PowerPoint today, and we'll make sure to leave plenty of time at the end so that you all can ask questions. So with that, let me introduce you to my colleagues. Chris?
Hey, good morning, everyone. Chris Pym, Thunderdome Zero Trust. So as it relates to DODNet, we've been working hand in hand with this team really since the beginning of the advent of Thunderdome and on the network. So we will complete This Is Terrain, which is something we're proud of, next month in June. So that's ahead of the curve for most other partners who have been working this. So we've actually been doing work. There's a lot of confusion sometimes between a prototype and operations. To me, when you do 80 sites in 2 years, you've been doing operations for 2 years, right? So from my perspective, we introduce several components and we leverage what we have existing. Mike and team and Carissa have been working through this for many years, the problem sets, whether it's SIEM or visibility of data or intelligence or like this is all part of Zero Trust, right? We're preventing lateral movement, we're presenting data to stop adversaries, and we've had some of these capabilities, and in many cases we're enhancing these capabilities through DODNet, right? So we work together. There's some new introduced, and there's some things that we're leveraging that are best of breed. And where it wasn't best of breed, we added things that were from the community that a lot of you work in, right? We took different technologies, but it's between 20 and 40 technologies, commercial off-the-shelf software that we've integrated together to get Zero Trust outcomes. Recently, over the last month, some of you may have heard, Thunderdome accomplished 152 of 152 Zero Trust activities. For those scoring at home, that's perfect. It doesn't mean that this is done with Zero Trust. I still think we have a lot of work. As it pertains to DODNet, every time we bring a DAF on board, Thunderdome is included, right? So we take, if you hear General Stanton talk, he's going to talk about data, right? We take the data from the devices we install, that Carissa and Mike's team install. That's part of their edge. We bring that data to a place where we can make decisions, and we enhance that data. In a lot of cases, we use orchestration to playbook and move that data faster so we can operate at the speed of machines versus the speed of people, which I think is a problem in SOC ops or CSSP ops. So that's just an intro, probably more than Chris bargained for. But we're certainly connected on that and everywhere we go for the DODNet migration. Yeah. Mike?
Hey, good morning. Mike Butler, DODNet Chief Engineer. I think I just want to push on this represents a good partnership, right? Not only within the agency, but obviously within industry as well, right? None of this is able to be done without the tools that we get provided via industry and technology and looking at roadmaps and all the capabilities that are out there. So I think this is just, this panel, the folks that are turned out here really just show that, hey, we have a partnership that's working with industry. We have a forward-thinking mindset. We want to be able to innovate, grow. As Chris mentioned, we're not done, right? Whether from a DODNet perspective or from a Zero Trust perspective. So we're looking forward to partner with you all. We're looking forward to partner internally inside the agency and seeing how we can go ahead and improve our services.
Good morning, everybody. Alex Hornberger. Hopefully everybody's not hurting too bad this morning. I got to bed at a decent time. And, Chris echoed it. And just one thing I do want to not undersell is the complexity of what we're doing. When you look at DODNet as they migrate these fourth estate agencies, and then in parallel and then congruently coming over to Thunderdome, these fourth estates, I'm pretty sure everybody's probably talked to them, the tech debt that's built up and that we're looking to fix, migrate, and address is no small feat. So the partnership between our teams, industry, and how we look to put the puzzle pieces together, again, just keep that in mind and kind of what the teams are attacking.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point, and we're going to jump into, I promise it's not death by PowerPoint, but I do have a slide or two. But, I want to talk a little bit about how we partner and how we attack kind of migrating a defense agency, right? So you guys can have a full appreciation of the scope and what transpires, right? We talked about 800 sites, over 300,000 users that have to migrate. It starts with a virtual discovery. we both need to have a full appreciation of what their existing network looks like so that we can have an idea of what it's going to take to get them up to our DODNet standard, what they're going to have to do from a Thunderdome perspective to get them up to their standard. So it starts there. Then we move into a physical discovery. From there, after we complete virtual, we have an idea of where do we need to go out and look inside the building and do a physical assessment of their network and their facilities. We combine that data together, and the team, in partnership with Leidos, will look at what does it take to design, what is it going to take from a planning perspective, what equipment do we need to purchase to get them to our standard, how long is it going to take to go ahead and implement the transition, right? So after they're done solutioning and coming up with that design plan, we move in right into migration execution. It could be we need new circuits. We all know those things take time. It could be, we need to move some network cables. We need to do a lot of upgrades from that perspective. Transitioning them, and their endpoints over to our instantiation. So we've done a lot of work, though. So what I have here for you on this chart is just kind of highlighting some of the common DAFA challenges we've seen so far. Now, we've been meeting with the DAFAs for years, right? So we're applying lessons learned as we go. But what we've seen at a high level is limited redundancy, which has mission impact, right? And that's where we know DODNet and Thunderdome can help, right? By providing that globally redundant network, because it's built for scale, scalability, and agility. You can see kind of some of the metrics there. And network performance. Mike has been leading with his team on implementing more network monitoring tools into our environment so that we have excellent visibility into our networks of what's going on. And that is one of the biggest, I think, advantages of coming to DODNet, that we're able to help, right? We want to be able to see issues before it hits the service desk. And the tools that he's rolling out, you'll hear us talk about Gen 1 versus Gen 2. But really, it's just the evolution of DODNet, right? It's us rolling out more automation and giving us that ability to see things coming before it hits that service desk. So we're seeing some of those things in the DAFA environment. And then end user experience metrics. So something else that Mike has been working on, and I'm stealing his thunder, but enabling the 24/7 NOC to rapidly respond to service requirements, that's huge. We've got more dashboards and things that we're rolling out so that there's more transparency in what we're seeing from an end user perspective. It helps us also increase our customer experience for the end users. So there's a lot going on there and continuing to evolve. And then, of course, it doesn't stop there, right? I think I've hit on this, but the innovation and investments, we're going to continue to do that so that we remain that center of excellence. But you can just kind of see here some of the DAFA challenges and the DoD enhancements that we've made thus far. Mike, anything, or team, anything you want to add there?
I think you hit on a lot of the main things, right? From a globally redundant environment, right? So as we grow, we bring those 370,000 users to the environment. The network infrastructure obviously is going to grow, the footprint's going to grow, the requirement for uptime is going to grow. We want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the warfighter. So, like Krista mentioned, adding those monitoring capabilities that are able to allow us to see what's happening on in the networks, what's happening for the end user experience before the censoring at the end user happens is really important. We want to be able to bake those monitoring capabilities into any of the new innovations that we bring in. We want to be able to tap into the data, the logs, the telemetry, the censoring that comes with a lot of these monitoring tools, and then feed that back into those experience dashboards, into the monitoring capabilities that we're standing up, into security logs, whatever makes it very available for us to be able to see the response that's on the network and what's happening inside the environments. Those are very important, and that goes across multiple classifications, right? We focus a lot of things for the innovation, sometimes on just an unclassified environment, but also for the classified environment, right? We understand that's where a lot of the warfighting happens, and then sometimes that classified environment or secret environments, those things kind of lag behind from a technology perspective, and to Alex's point, have maybe more of that tech debt. We want to make sure that we're having parity across those unclassed and classified environments as well. So we want to deploy those tools to both the unclassed, the classified, and be able to go ahead and present a single picture about how the DODNet environment environment is running. So innovations, moving toward cloud technologies, baking in zero trust capabilities, all those things are kind of standard for what we're trying to roll towards in the future of DODNet.
Yeah, I think, parity is a really key word there. A lot of what we're doing, our vision, our mission, and how we define success is being able to provide that parity, right? We have to posture ourselves as a department to have one environment that allows all of the defense agencies to collaborate and do their job quickly and efficiently. That is our goal, and we believe we're getting there with DODNet and Thunderdome.
One thing we didn't mention specifically is some other capabilities that come into play that DODNet and our CSSP are going to be able to leverage. Now, I think of things like software-defined networking, right? So what we've introduced here is an overlay, right? That really, we didn't create a network here. We all been working on a network for a long time, but we did create an overlay where you're able to make decisions and route traffic based on the best available path. I mean, that's the panacea. That's what we're working towards, right? Like, I'm not saying we're 100% there, but that's where we're going. And once you do that, you can think of the next step. And me and Mike have talked about this a lot from the perspective of, what if I want to put a block across the entire DoD terrain from JFHQ DODN? This allows you the ability to do that from a command and control standpoint that didn't exist before. So like that's game changing in my mind at real time. So we could talk about the visibility. I think that's absolutely essential. We could also talk about the blocks we could introduce real time. We could also talk about automation and orchestration across the entire environment, which I think is improved with these technologies merging together.
Yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah, I think, and just wanted to add on that, I think that is very key, right? So when we talk about migrating these disparate networks and all these different service desks and all these different environments into one environment, that response, right, to being able to go ahead and say, hey, there's a cybersecurity event or there's something that's coming down from JFHQ DODN that says we need to be able to respond quickly. Now you have one service provider providing that response to whatever that security incident, whatever that requirement is, very quickly, right? And obviously from a DISA standpoint, us partnering together and being able to implement those things across a single network makes the response time as well as the partnership with other services and other networks throughout the department very important. We can share our results essentially about how we roll things out to other service providers as well and say, hey, we're in sync across the department about how we're addressing the threat.
Yeah, and I think it's important to tie back to the director's priorities we heard Mr. Barnhurst talk about yesterday, right? Readiness. It's right there. That's part of what we want to achieve, is that ability for folks to be ready. And then, of course, we talked about continuing to modernize. So we've made such amazing strides with the technologies, to your point, Chris, and we're not going to stop there. So we want to hear from you and having an appreciation of where we're going and where you can help us is vital. All right, I got one more slide, and then I'm done. So I'm going to tee it up for you guys to talk a little bit about the common use IT as it pertains to DoD and Thunderdome, and then some of the key Thunderdome components. You want to take this, or Alex?
Sure. I'll start, Alex, then you can build from there. So first, let's start with, we leverage technology, like I mentioned earlier, that was existing, right? So these are the new components when you look at the right, really. The big thing we've introduced through the DoDNet migration is something we call the Zero Trust Edge. It's a device that merges a lot of different network devices, including firewalling, intrusion prevention, intrusion detection, routing, software-defined networking. So we've introduced the Zero Trust Edge from a company called Versa Networks that's new to the department and has been performing excellent for us. We've introduced that. We've also walked down the path of remote access using industry leaders in that space. And we're using Palo Alto Networks for that. But really what that's for is so people can access the network remotely as a regular user or an administrator, right? So we have both use cases, and then what the magic we've done, there's a lot of magic, but this magical thing is we've integrated those two companies, which, by the way, a lot of corporate people here. Interoperability is a challenge in this space, right? When you talk about the size of this network, DoD or DODN, DODNet, right? It's not all going to be one tool. So we need companies to work together to get to common goals. So the goodness here is we've merged together what Versa does on premise with what Palo does from a remote standpoint. And both of those companies do a lot more than those things, but that's how we've leveraged them in this space. And then the last thing that pertains to DoDNet on this slide is really the DCO, which I mentioned earlier, right? And that's the SIEM, whether you're using Elastic or Splunk or Big Data Platform or UDP. Like, we're doing a lot of things with data for our CSSP effort. And the only other thing you'll see on the slide from my standpoint is the application security stack, which is something that we apply more on the application side than on the network side. So as it pertains to DODNet, places like Office 365 or DOS and things we're accessing, we've done some application work on that side from an identity standpoint and other standpoints, segmentation standpoints. But that's what the application security stack is. So Alex, over to you if you want to build from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing I think is not missing here, but I think we maybe overlook at times is the identity portion of it. From a zero trust perspective, it really starts from a user identity, a device identity, and then it feeds into the rest of the components where we want to make conditional based access control decisions. We want to understand the attributes. We want to understand the data. So how can we take all those information, all those attributes, do some crunch and munch, and provide the user the least privilege, or depending on the risks that they have, the access that they need to complete their mission. And then when we take that a step further and we look at different things and mission partner environment, coalition, all these disparate networks that we want to tie together and give people access in real time, that's the mission that we're really trying to support there.
And so one other thing I would add, Chris, just Mr. Resnick, I don't know if he's in the audience, but he talks from the ZTPFMO about the purple team examination. I see Angie here who helped us with that. But 152 and 152 is a zero trust outcome, and I know zero trust is buzzy, and probably a lot of you are tired of hearing that. What I will say that's tangible in my mind is we blocked and alerted every single thing that happened from the purple team from day one. So sometimes, Mr. Resnick will get on a path, and I kind of, I talk to him about it. I cringe a little bit because I say, it was collaborative. It was purple team. But let's start with on DODNet or broader. It was blocked, alerted, and white carded every single time they tried something from an adversarial standpoint. It's kind of a big deal if you're looking for outcomes.
And on a normal business day, where that wasn't the only thing they were focusing on every day, right? It's normal operations. We were able to use our analytics, automation, and really see what the adversary is doing and share that information.
And that's both teams, Mike. That's your team, that's our team working on that.
No, I think that's big, right? Because on a daily basis, right, how do you determine the best ways to go ahead and say, hey, this is something that's just normal business activity versus the adversary, right? So being able to filter those things out is very important to make sure, one, performance and degradation doesn't happen, but also make sure that the environment's still secure.
Yeah, and going back to the scale of the network, the scale of the users, it's the needle in the haystack making it larger or making the haystack smaller, so.
So you talk about zero trust. We hear that buzzword all the time. How can you elaborate to tell us a little bit more about, is it a concept? How does it relate to Thunderdome?
It's really an architecture, right, from my standpoint. But how does it relate to Thunderdome? Thunderdome is a code word for implementation of zero trust, right? It basically takes all of the pillars of zero trust and all the things that are existing. I think of things like endpoint protection. Alex mentioned identity. We've talked about SIEM. We've talked about the network. We talked about orchestration. So you take all of those things together to get to a common goal, right? The common goal is to prevent the adversary from accessing your systems and identify where the adversary is. Attribution is key in this space, right? It's really scary to think that just a few years ago, you would get an IP on DODNet, and you'd be off and running in a network. Like, let's just work through that use case for a second, right? Angie accesses the network, and if she gets into the network through a VPN, right, standard VPN, then you're able to move laterally across the rest of the network without any policy enforcement point or conditional access decision. So what we've done here, working with DODNet, is introduced a policy enforcement point on every base post camp station that we've put DODNet, right? So now there is no lateral movement. You're getting a conditional access check for your identity and your device every single time you move place to place.
Improving our cybersecurity posture.
Absolutely.
And not to get academic or philosophical, it's a true instantiation of attribute-based access control, right? That's concept's been around forever, especially when you start looking at software development. But we took it to the network, we took it to the application, and we took it to the data. We're able to pull all these data points in and not allow people to move laterally, to Chris's point, and to ensure you're getting the access you need to complete your mission. Nothing more, nothing less.
So sorry, Mike, but that's beyond the buzz, right? Forget about zero trust. This is cybersecurity 101 that we've all been doing for 25 years or longer, right? So my perspective is, do you have an identity? Do you have conditional access? Do you have microsegmentation? Do you understand who's doing what on your network from a SIEM, which we've kind of beat to death in this panel, which I think is supremely important? But forget about the word zero trust. What outcome are you trying to achieve, right? And that's where my head's at on it. So the word is the word in my mind.
I was just going to add, I think from a service delivery perspective, right, we're always trying to make sure that DoDNet is available wherever, right? We have always kind of used that tagline, anytime, any place, any device, right? Being able to provide services to the warfighter. To that extent about cybersecurity, right? I should be able to have, a user from multiple different agencies sit inside the same environment, sitting basically next to each other, right? I have 3 different, agencies all kind of plugged into the same network, but still not being able to do that lateral movement and being able to still access the resources that are only attributed to what their access is supposed to be, right? So based on their identity, hey, I can be in that same facility, same network, but only have access to the things that are required to do my job. So that's really important, right, for us to be able to still provide the services at a high level and obviously at scale, but still bake in, like I said, that security aspect to do that micro-segmentation across the board, and then make sure they are able to only access the things that are needed.
No, I think that's great. And our adversaries are continuing to grow more sophisticated. So where do you see us going from here as it relates to Thunderdome and cybersecurity and making sure that we're remaining one step ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the key there is intelligence sharing and automation. As, again, beating the dead horse of the scale and the size of the network, but as the adversary evolves, as we read the news and we see all these different things coming out, how can we have automation and scalability? When we see something, intelligence comes out, order comes out, how can we in one click deploy a fix, deploy a block, do whatever we need to do without having to employ 100 people, 1,000 people? That is the key to me, is being able to scale, being able to share intelligence, not just with us, our mission partners. If we see it on one network or one service, how does that get to us in a ingestible, digestible way that we can kind of make decisions and let data, another great buzzword is data-driven decisions. How can we really get to that point, and how can we take the human out the loop and let machines do what machines do best?
And that's an evolution, right? I don't think we're ever going to, just like cybersecurity, we're never going to be completely happy at the place we're at. We should continue to grow and get better. And we're continuously working with DODNet to look for the best technology that we can change, replace, add to, complement. And that's where we need your help. So that's a continuous effort that's going to keep going in my mind, Mike.
And I think the things that we're learning, right, from the telemetry that comes from the environment, right, the things that we've implemented help feed the other programs within the agency, as well as, right, the technology that we need to drive as well. So working with the industry partners, we can take our lessons learned from the deployments that we've rolled out and say, hey, the feedback is from the user community. We need, increased visibility. We need more ML. We need more AI. We need to be able to take all this data that we are collecting and be able to sift through it faster. I think that's a very good touch point, because we're at the edge, right? We're at the edge. We're at the user level. We are able to go ahead and say, hey, this is what we're seeing from either feedback or just as we monitor the network. We want to provide that back, like I said, not only inside the department, but to industry as well, and say, hey, here's the demand signal for increased technologies, for better visibility, for better, segmentation, whatever it may be. We want to partner with those the vendors that are out there, as well as the agencies that we're servicing, and provide a better scalability of service, but also a cyber perspective as well. And I think the next iteration of, hey, bringing in that AI kind of driven technology and being able to use that'll probably help us get the speed to service, the speed to response a little bit better as well.
Yeah, and just to kind of tail off of that is, we really want a two-way conversation, right? We want to see, when you're on your corporate networks and things are happening, you see evolving threats, you see this, you see that, feed that back into us so we can work better as a team, because I think Mr. Barnhurst was talking about it yesterday. When you do your inspections, when you're ready, we're a team. It's not just us up here. It's just not the contractors. It's industry sharing information and working better together.
And so we talked a lot about the security. Let's transition a little bit and talk about the user experience, because ultimately Thunderdome and DODNet are there to improve the user experience. Do you all have any examples this far of where we've done that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a large discussion around elimination of technical debt, right? So everybody knows the Department of Defense has a lot of technical debt and how we've done networks over, decades, right? So what this allowed us to do with both DODNet and Thunderdome is take out some of that technical debt and streamline your operating experience from a networking standpoint, in addition to looking at the endpoints and picking the right things on the endpoint that we need from an agent sprawl standpoint, right? So we've done a lot of work in that space to eliminate technical debt. Another thing we've done is we've introduced really efficiency from the standpoint of where you're accessing the network. So we've done some metrics, Chris, on if you're at home or you're TDY and you're remote access to a DODNet solution, no longer are you going through JRSS and the NIPRNet to get to DOD 365, for example. You're going from your home directly to that cloud environment. So it's cloud to cloud. And we saw a significant improvement in that space just on that use case alone. One thing I wanted to point out that I haven't had a chance till now is the complexity. Chrissy, you mentioned complexity, but let's just talk through what that means from as it pertains to this subject. We've eliminated JRSS with this effort, which we haven't even talked about. And JRSS was a large combination of software and hardware that was providing mid-tier security. Now, we didn't do the same thing over again, right? Thunderdome and DODNet approaches this in a totally different manner, where basically you put protection closest to the user on post, and then closest to the application in the cloud, and we cloud manage all this. So I don't want to underplay the complexity of what these teams do. Every site we do takes a minimum of 3 ASIs, right? So 3 service interruptions to move all the firewall rules from JRSS or wherever you're getting security now, and all of the routing from your LAN and from your WAN, your wide area network and local area network. So that has to happen in real time. So when Krista talks about discovery, that's what she's talking about. She's talking about getting those rules and getting that networking data, pulling that information in between the 2 combined teams, Leidos and Booz Allen, who work together to basically handle both ends of that equation, to handle that complexity. So like those of you who have done networking understand the complexity that we're talking about, right? So it's thousands of rules in some cases for your firewalls and your routing that we have to talk through at the scale and scope of DODNet.
Well, and we haven't even touched on this, but we, digressing a little bit here, is some of these mission applications that we're seeing as well, and the modern auth that's required. As part of what we do in our discovery, we take a look at their entire application, all their applications, and do an app rationalization. And some of it we're seeing, and we've seen it in some of our DAFAs right now, is they're not there yet with modern auth, which presents challenges. And so part of what we do is working through how do we get them there.
Yeah, absolutely. So a part of that discovery and kind of understanding and providing feedback to them about, hey, where we can get them into an ICAM solution versus legacy auth, right? Where we can go ahead and say, hey, we have rationalized your applications. You may not necessarily need additional licensing. Let's help drive costs down. We can kind of provide you similar capabilities using the things that are already approved on the DODNet catalog. Those type of things are part of our standard processes to ingest their requirements into the DODNet. Another thing I think from a user experience standpoint that we also partner with the Thunderdome on pretty quickly is our virtual desktop platforms, right? So from a user experience, right, it's important for us to, like I mentioned, be able to provide services anywhere. I think it's very important also that we recognize that we partner with Thunderdome even to go ahead and envelop, that the network boundary around our virtual desktop platforms, around the zero trust capabilities that are also deployed on-prem. So we've gone towards cloud-based technologies. We want to use virtual desktop solutions that are cloud-based and be able to go ahead and have these accessible via the internet. But we still want to partner and have that focus on from a cybersecurity standpoint and leverage those same conditional access, the same type of segmentation that happens when you're accessing the network inside the office, also when you're at home and doing remote via the internet. So those virtual desktop solutions that we're looking at, partnering with Thunderdome, they're all meshed together, right? We're not taking something separate from how we're doing our traditional migrations and doing something different when we're talking cloud-based solutions. We are working to go ahead and have both on-prem, both cloud, all use the same technologies.
Yeah, and I'll take it maybe a different look or a different lens look. The user experience, absolutely, for a normal user logging onto websites, it's great. But I look at it from like an ISSO, ISSM, network administrator, systems administrator. When they come to DODNet, when they come to Thunderdome, what do they get to stop doing? What do they don't have to focus on? What can they inherit from us? When you look at Fourth Estate, their mission isn't IT, their mission isn't CSSP. So when you come to Thunderdome and you come to DODNet, you're able to inherit our controls, inherit our capabilities, so they can now focus back on their real mission and not have the overhead and the burden, the cost of all the additional, tasks and activities.
I think that's huge. That's one of the biggest things I tell the defense agencies, when we get together and we start the migration journey. Our goal is to provide you a network and endpoint environment that you don't have to worry about that anymore. You go focus on your mission. Let us provide that foundation for you so that you have the tools that you need to be successful on your mission. I think that's huge, and that's what our goal is, and that's what we're delivering today for sure. All right, so I've got some questions here for you guys. There's some, things that we've heard from industry. So I'm going to go ahead and tee those up now and throw those out at you and start to answer some of those questions that we've seen from industry. So, Chris, you're up first. Many organizations struggle to balance Zero Trust's security benefits with potential impacts on user experience. We talked about the benefits of your future, migrated customers that they'll see with Thunderdome without making life overly difficult for employees or hindering productivity. Can you talk a little bit more about the reduction in the administrative burden that you're seeing as well?
So I think I've talked a lot about complexity, right? But let's look at this from a user standpoint. All that changes for the user is the global protect client that you click on.
Yeah.
So we've done all this work in the background, but instead of using a VPN connection, now you're using a client that you're clicking on. So literally what we've had to change the culture on and change the training on is, and we've done a lot of great work as far as advertising this to DISA, is instead of clicking on this button, click on this button. And when you do that, we're going to get all of this rich data from an identity standpoint, but they don't need to know that, right? They need to know that they're being monitored because they're on a DoD network.
Yeah.
But how we monitor them is totally different. But user experience, Krista, doesn't change. So we're getting all this goodness that we're talking about, and really from a user experience standpoint, it hasn't changed. So for me, that's a huge benefit. So in addition to the removal of complexity, which administrators care about, IT people care about, from a user standpoint, they're just accessing their stuff faster.
Yep.
And really, that's what we're shooting for, right, Mike? I mean, that's where my head's at.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the overlay that you talked about, right, the architecture that's in place has honestly sped up the remote access type capabilities, right? So I think we've seen a significant increase in the ability to connect fast, as well as being able to access the resources that they need. So we probably have some metrics around that, right? But we've seen a significant jump, right, from going from what we were talking about JRSS as that, remote access VPN solution to the Global Protect solution. We've seen that speed and increase of, hey, I'm able to access the network faster, I'm able to log in faster, I'm able to access the tools and web faster. Those things play a big part in being able to get into the mission, accomplish day-to-day tasks, and then obviously be able to still get all that analytics, all that data, so that we are monitoring the session appropriately and keeping cybersecurity in mind.
Yeah, and one just small thing to add there is everyone's used a slow laptop. To me, it's one of the worst things to do in the world is when you go to a website, it spins, or you try to open Microsoft Word and it just spins and you just want to drive yourself crazy. We're setting the standard of we're not going to do something that makes the user experience worse. Is this change we are making going to increase the user experience? If so, yes, let's go do. Does it keep it the same? Well, why? Let's start questioning what we're doing. Are we doing something wrong? And if it degrades the user experience, makes the user more frustrated and more help, because that then drives help desk calls, that then drives more costs in other places. We don't want to make that change. So that's the standard we have really set when we look at DODNet and Thunderdome.
So Alex, next question's for you. What are some of the biggest misconceptions or myths around Zero Trust that you encounter, and how would you advise organizations?
Yes, so I'm guessing seeing all the banners and all the good stuff, I can just buy one product and I'm zero trusted and I'm done, right? That's the slogan from industry. But no, it's puzzle pieces, right? At the end of the day, it's a puzzle piece game that we have to put all together. We have to understand the user's mission, the outcome that we're looking for, because that is the first. And then we have to look at integrations. We have to have the people to do it. We have to understand how the network should work, how the data should work, and then make that. And then, yes.
I think one of the biggest puzzle pieces that Alex and team are probably contending with is whatever bespoke solution that is on these mission environments, right? So a lot of this, the technologies, like we said, TechnoDet, they've probably been developed in silos, or maybe developed so long ago that the people that did develop are no longer there. They have to go ahead and work through the minutia of trying to figure out how do we either, like I said, modernize or apply zero trust principles to legacy applications, or hey, there's some prerequisites that are needed in order for us to work through those things. I think that's really big, right? That is a big part of that puzzle piece and putting together the whole picture of how we bring a zero trust architecture, whether it's at the mission application level or whether it's the common use services, We have to work through, the difficulty of just legacy applications, legacy tech debt, all those things, right, to come up with a solution that is secure but also modernized.
Moving a monolithic application to the cloud does not fix your problem, right? The investment that has to go into the application development and modernization to get away from kind of that moat and build bigger castle walls to protect their application.
There's just no easy button, right? And Alex said it, Alex pointed to it, but I hear this notion of a zero trust environment and I bristle at it, right? Like, because what I think you could have is an environment, be it on cloud or on premise, that has tools that are able to be integrated into getting zero trust outcomes or cyber defense outcomes. But the idea that we're just going to build a place and we're going to move applications there and it's going to be off and running and it's easy uplift, like people who have worked in cloud or on prem, that's just not real. So like the integration of something like ICAM is non-trivial, right? And I talked to Mr. Resnick and I talked to the ZTP FMO and DOD CIO about that. I'm like, I have a team of experts, hundreds of people. It took them weeks to integrate ICAM into Thunderdome, right? That is not easy. So, and that's just one thing. Like multiply that by 152, because most things are those things. So that's a misconception, Alex, in my mind. It's just, let's not oversimplify the problem. That doesn't help anybody. Like, it's complex. Let's work through it with you. Yeah,
and then mission application owners have to balance functional requirements that are their day-to-day business, enhancements, security fixes. Meanwhile, here, we are going, hey, now you have to zero trust your application. Here's 152 things you're not budgeted, you don't have scope for, you don't have the people for. How do we make that better for you?
Yeah, no, I think those are all really good points, and I've got one more question for you, and then we'll transition to take questions from the audience. So, the adversary is always moving, right? How do you guys see the zero trust and DODNet too, right? Landscape changing in the future. Where do you think the emerging threats are?
So I think you start with place and time of need, right? I would approach a zero trust or a cybersecurity problem much different on SIPR than I would on NIPR, and much different for coalition forces than I would U.S. forces. Right, so we're working through some of those challenges. So, we require allies and partners, right? But you don't want all your allies and partners, and you have different allies and partners to access all of your data. So that conditional access, as we evolve, as we leverage our partners and allies, let's think about what conditional access looks like. I don't know that we do a great job of that from a data sharing standpoint. What I do know is it can improve. So from an emergent kind of challenge is tactical, right? Like how we get these devices in places in time of need. We're working with the Coast Guard on Coast Guard cutters, for example. Great example, right? So how do we do that and connect it into the rest of DODNet or their own network to be able to get the protections they need and the identity they need from an authentication standpoint? So tactically, I think there's a lot of room. I think coalition forces and conditional access is going to be huge in the next couple of years.
Actually, Chris went where I was going to go with conditional access. So I'll pivot to all the data that we talked about, right? Yes, so we get all this rich data, right? We get all the logs, we get all the telemetry that's happening out there. We use that to make decisions about what you can access in the environment. From my perspective, I want to be able to use that information to be able to go ahead and increase the automation, right? Make decisions, right, in an automated fashion to say, hey, we need to, block this, we need to access this, we need to be able to go ahead and spin up more resources, better performance, or we, again, just share the information to say, hey, from our, eyes in the skies, the DCO capabilities, we have some larger issue that needs to be shared across the department so we can respond fast, right? So I want to be able to take a lot of that information that we are getting from the tools that we're putting on the environment, especially from a zero trust perspective, and then drive the automation that's needed in the environment, right? As we scale, I can't scale up the people a lot of times with it, right? I can't continue to have more and more operators in the environment. We don't need that. I need the tools in the environment to be automated. I need it to be able to go ahead and respond. I need ultimately for it to be able to go ahead and make a decision in the environment without having necessarily someone to push the button to go ahead and have an action taken. So those are the things that I think we're going to drive towards more inside DODNet, and it's going to be leveraging a lot of the data that we're getting as we implement these new cyber tools, as well as we have the more performance monitoring tools. All those things are going to help us to have the information to drive those decisions in an automated fashion.
Chris stole yours and you stole mine. That's awesome. The one thing, and I'll hate myself for saying this, is I think we need to be more agile, more iterative. We cannot wait 6 months to make a change, right? We can't have policy hold us back. If policy, is there something that needs to change to enable us to move faster, we have to do that, right? The adversary is not waiting. The adversary wants our lunch. They want our lunch money. They want us to fail. and we can't be hindered by roadblocks and the answer no all the time. So I think looking at an iterative process continually to improve. We don't need the silver bullet. We don't need to have perfect on day one. We need to establish, understand bugs, understand problem sets, understand what to improve, and we need to get better every day.
Yeah. Perfection is the enemy of good enough, right? We need to be okay with accepting some risk in certain areas and moving out iteratively.
And it's not ignoring risk, right? It's,
No, not ignoring.
Yeah, and it's really continuing to, judge it, evaluate it, and move forward.
Yep. Okay. I think we've got about 15 minutes, so I'd like to open it up to the audience if anyone's got any questions for us.
Someone out there does. You've been trying to talk to
way.
us all week.
We answered all your questions?
Job's done.
Here we go.
First brave
Somebody's
soul.
brave.
Always the hardest one.
Comply to connect. Trying to adhere to that for industry, for partners. Is there a standard that each agency, each department has in order to meet that? Or is ICAM enforcing that? How do we be able to adhere to comply to connect?
Yeah, so I know this is Mike's sweet spot, but I'll start, Mike, and then I'll hand it over to you if I can. So through what we've introduced and what we've been talking about Zero Trust Edge, we're looking at Comply to Connect a little bit differently and how we can leverage the tools we already have to make decisions. So there's 5 steps to Comply to Connect, right, that I'm not going to walk through, but we're leveraging different software. And in a lot of cases, we're using Global Protect and the data we're pulling from the endpoint to determine what we need to do to fix the device. So we have software on the endpoint we leverage. Do we need to modify that software or that workflow to where we need to add additional steps, maybe 3, 4, and 5 to get to Comply to Connect? Absolutely. Right, but we have several products doing this, Mike, and we look at how to merge that to a single product is what we're working towards.
Absolutely.
To get the outcomes that we're looking for. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, and I think everything that we're doing around that Comply to Connect standard and baseline is around the posture of the device, right? We want to be able to go ahead and take a look at what information is coming off that device, where it's getting kind of correlated, and then make a decision based off what that posture of that device is, whether it needs access to the environment or not. So we are looking at those 5 steps that Chris mentioned, but also being able to go ahead and make sure that we have the right posture, and it's also feeding to the right tools to make that decision to go ahead and say, hey, at the switch level or at the remote access level, that device is compliant to be able to go ahead and be on the network. So we are working through those standards. Global Protect is one of the things that we potentially can go ahead and look at more further from an endpoint perspective, but also when you get all the way down to the switch level and NAC and 802.1x, all those things play a part in defining the posture of what's on the environment, and that's how we're going to go ahead and make sure that we not only look at the current standards for CTC, but also potentially say, hey, there's some modifications that we need to do to potential policy or push some changes in standards so that we can go ahead and modernize the environment as well.
Thank you. One last part to that is when you authenticate, you're only passing I'm compliant or not. How are you guys navigating that? Because you have the agent on the machine, how are you calculating the risk of that when you use Entra ID and it's only saying its device is compliant or not?
Yeah, so I think that goes back to some of the tools, right? So not just are they compliant, not from an identity standpoint, but also, like I said, the posture. Hey, is this device patched appropriately? Does it have the right necessary agents running? Does it have the necessary applications running? Is there something that is a 0-day that's out there that has not been addressed yet, and we need to make a decision? There could be an area where they just need to drop into a segmented part of the network, not necessarily full network access, but maybe just an area where we can go ahead and make sure we can still maybe remote into the device or provide them access to a tool so that we can reassess the compliance of that device before we allow the network connection. So I think it's more than just the identity and logging into it. Is absolutely the agents, the rest of the posture of the device, the rest of the applications that are running. All those things will feed our decision on whether that device is compliant or not.
And we do that now.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to get better. We're going to improve. But as Mike said, as it pertains to device, we're making those decisions and remediations now.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I know Thunderdome has apps for application access, but are you guys looking at kind of what the new buzzword is, ZTAA, Zero Trust Application Access? Do you guys see that outside of what apps does? Or do you guys see that as providing its own set of challenges?
Yeah, so application security stack in my mind, which was on the slide, right, is a combination of products to get you an outcome, right? So there's a lot of evolution in that space, right? There's a lot of companies doing work in that space. And from my perspective, I'm less concerned about what products we use, but how we integrate them together to get effects, right? We have work to do from the standpoint of microsegmentation and applications. For example, we have work to do for privileged access management. How our administrators and our insiders reach into, because that's a big threat vector, right? So from our standpoint, we've got a lot of work to do as far as session-based administrative access, for example. There's tools that do that on the market, right? Are we doing that for every single application? Well, no. We do have control of our administrators, right? We are doing a lot of the right things. We've been doing that for years. But when you start thinking about kind of new things like session-based, or when an administrator leaves, eliminating an administrator real time, at time of need. So app security stack, I don't think we need to get around or get behind certain tools. I think we need to get at the effects we're looking for and then pick the tools that make sense for that environment. Alex?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the one thing, going back to the original point on complexity, every application is different, right? We have to treat web applications different than we have to treat a database, than we have to treat maybe a thick client application. So depending on what the mission is, what the application is supposed to do, we just need a capability standards to put those protections and get those zero trust outcomes.
And then if you throw OT in there, right, and you start throwing tactical in there, power water systems in there, how we cool at the deck or cool the computing center or the cloud computing center, right? Like, then it's a totally different approach.
The diversity
right?
is incredible.
And of course, supply chain risk management is at the root of all this.
Thank you. Any? Oh.
Two more.
This is a softball. This is not going to be hard, I promise. Back when Thunderdome started, that was years ago. AI was not an industry like it is now. I mean, there's so many vendors and people doing it in part of their tool sets. Are you revisiting some of the things you had done in the past and going and taking a fresh look at all the things in the market for AI and where you can insert it?
Yeah, I think we can go. Sorry, Alex, but I think we can go. So two ways, Maurice, is what I would say, right? The first thing is that the technologies that we've already introduced are evolving as we speak too, right? So when we enhance a product that we have with AI and ML, we incorporate that new product offering into what it is we're doing. So that's one space. So every single thing that we've integrated, we leverage the AI that the company comes up with. And let's be honest with ourselves, right? Like we leverage industry and COTS to a large degree to accomplish all of these things we're trying to accomplish, right? So evolution of the product lines that we have, and then we introduce new product lines for things from an AI ML standpoint, right? So a lot of the conversations we're having here are, sure, you do these things in this way, but my company does this in a novel and unique way. And Alex and I talked to Mike, I'm sure Chris as well, to how do we incorporate that scale? But the key thing for me, and the question I always ask is, how do we do it now and how do you do it better? Mm-hmm. And whether it's AI, ML, or anything else, let's talk about that. I'm not bespoke to what we have in this solution. I don't think it's the answer forever. I think it's the answer for right now. Alex?
Yeah, and I think the question I always ask, and kind of going to Chris's point, is what are we trying to AI and ML, right? What are we replacing? What are we doing? And where I see the focus and the continuous improvement is, how do I take staff, supplement them with AI and ML so they get better, right? How do I use it as a tool and not the solution? Because at the end of the day, the person's still going to be in the loop somewhere. Someone's going to be clicking buttons, doing stuff. How does AI and ML make them more lethal, more effective, more ready for the director? Priorities.
Yeah, just being able to refactor those resources, right? So that if that AI ML is being useful, right, now you have those people being able to be more effective in other areas, right? I can just go ahead and say, hey, we need to realign them to either another mission, or how can they be more efficient? Now we have these tools that are able to enable us to do that.
Thank you. Right behind you.
Thank you. You're talking a lot about zero trust in regards to networks and applications, but how about files? Especially, there's been a lot of cases of files being leaked. Are you looking at any ways to secure those and then track that anything time they're open and all of open, printed, and all of that?
Yeah. So data is a wicked problem, right? And when you look at the data pillar of zero trust, for those of you that are familiar with that, is a place that I think there's been a perceived weakness, because all data is not equal, right? NetFlow data is not the same as user data, right? And We use common schema. We use common data dictionaries and common schemes for data in places where it makes sense from an airflow standpoint. But from, I think, more to your point as far as the question, if we're talking about 365, we use inherent tools that are in 365 to get at like Purview, Azure Information Protection, things like that. Now, that's not the silver bullet in this space, right? We're also looking at our vendor partners for other things. For file share specifically, there's some really great companies that are doing some really great things as far as crawling your file shares and pulling out confidential or private information like social security numbers or health data. So we've got some really cool use cases in that space. So I think we're doing great. We're meeting the need now, but I look to where we can improve from a data standpoint and really a data loss prevention standpoint. So we have a solution, but the solution needs to improve from my perspective.
Yeah, and the one thing I always, and I love the question, is there's a difference between Office 365 data. There's a difference between syslog data just flowing into a SIEM, and then what about the data in the databases for the applications? How are we getting after that? Because to me, that's the harder problem. I have structured and unstructured data in a database. How am I tagging that? How am I doing DLP there? And once the adversary comes in the back door and kind of grabs that data, how do we see them leaving with it? Because that's the real crown jewels they want. Yeah.
Alex, I think you hit on it with the data tagging. I think that's an area that we need a lot more emphasis in, right? Within that data pillar is being able to identify the data, right? Tag it appropriately, whether it's coming into the environment or whether it's, like, say, being exfilled out. How do we identify what type of data it is? How do we identify if it's something that is, a DLP issue that we have to address? But all this data that's been there, and some of it's been around for years, right? Being able to go ahead and say, hey, this is something that probably needs to have some type of records management policy look at it, or hey, this is actually active data that needs to be, tagged appropriately so that we know what to do with it. It's a challenge, right? And inside all these DAFAs that we're going to consolidate, we need to be able to go ahead and accurately tag it, and that is a problem I think that we're trying to address from an agency perspective, whether we're talking with 365 and the DOS group or the structured data that's on-prem. We have a general issue that we're trying to work through with the tools that are available to us now, but how do we get better at it? And I think it does start with making sure that we are absolutely tagging things appropriately.
So I can't thank you guys enough for all the great questions and the participation today. We've unpacked a lot of great information. As you can see, our mission is complex, but we're very excited. We're very passionate about what we get the opportunity to do every day. So for closing remarks, I'm going to start with you, Chris. Anything you want to leave the audience with?
No, I appreciate everyone coming out and listening to us. What I would say, though, is this is, starts with a revolution and becomes an evolution in my mind, right? I don't think we have all the right answers. I'm not pretending that we do. I think we've done a lot of great work in DODNet and DISA, and I will put out there for consideration that we're further ahead in the department than anybody else from my perspective. Now I'm probably jaded, but I think we're farther along than almost anybody in the department. And from my standpoint, it's because of partnerships like this, and not necessarily the topic of this conversation, but we also have partnerships across DISA as it pertains to hosting environments and things like Olympus, Stratus, the service offerings that you hear about that maybe DODNet is going to enable the end user standpoint, but the cloud standpoint, the on-prem standpoint is a wicked problem we have to solve. So we don't get there without teaming across DISA, and we don't get there without teaming across industry. So I hope that's the takeaway you're all getting. I think Chris has probably said it a couple of times. I know Mike and Alex and I have, but I think we're doing really well. But I'm never satisfied, is where I'd put it.
Yeah.
No, likewise, I think we do a great job of leaning forward, right? We partner together, we come up with great solutions, we try to be industry leaders, we try to be department leaders. We want to make sure that we are bringing best of breed to the environment. Some of the things that we always say regular is be aggressive but not reckless, right? Sometimes we do have to break down some barriers, right? We do have to go ahead and lean forward. That's going to be a little disruptive, but we want to partner with you all to be able to be disruptive, but in an organized fashion, right? Be able to be productive with that disruption. So there's nothing wrong with breaking a few eggs, right, to make an omelet, but we have to be able to go ahead and say, hey, here's our purpose behind it, here's what we're trying to drive after. And I think the industry will help us do that as we continue to lean forward.
Yeah, and my thing is just, grateful for the partnerships, right? We, as Chris mentioned, we do a lot of COTS integration, so it doesn't work without you, and you don't work without us. So I love to hear the feedback. When you come in, please come in with a problem you're solving. Give us a pointed, like, hey, this is the requirement, or this is what risk we're mitigating. So look forward to continued conversations, and thank you, everybody, for their support.
Yeah, and I'll just say tomorrow we have the Meet the PMs. So does anyone know the time of that off the top of their head? If not,
lunchtime is where it is.
It's around lunchtime. Definitely come by, see us. We would love to talk to you. We would love to hear from you. We are always staying hungry to evolve and be that center of excellence, and we can't do it without your support. So thanks again for coming out and for your time. I hope this was valuable, and enjoy the rest of your day.